I want to tell you about a phone call I made 2 years ago that I still think about more than I should.
What happened?
I had been working with a client for about 4 months, a small architecture firm, 2 founders, very particular about their aesthetic and their identity. They had hired me to develop a complete brand for them, no-go visual language, the whole thing, and they had given me significant creative freedom, which I appreciated and which I think I used well.
And then
I presented the final direction on a video call with both founders. I had prepared carefully. I walked them through the concept, the reasoning, the executions, and somewhere in the first 10 minutes I could feel something shift, not dramatically, just a quality of response that changed. The questions became slightly more pointed. The silences became slightly more pointed.
What do you think turned it?
I know exactly what turned it. I have gone back to that call many times in my memory. About 12 minutes, and one of the founders asked me why I had moved away from the color palette they had mentioned in the original brief. They had referenced a particular shade of warm gray. I had moved towards something cooler and more minimal, and I explained why. The explanation itself was fine.
You told them you knew their firm better than they did.
I did not mean it that way, but that is how it landed. And the moment it landed, I felt it. The founder who had asked the question did not respond immediately. Her partner, who had been quiet, said, "Interesting," in a tone that meant the opposite of interesting.
What did you do?
The wrong thing first. I tried to explain further, which made it worse because when you try to explain yourself after you have said something that has landed badly, the explanation often sounds like an argument. Like you were trying to convince them that you were right rather than understanding why what you said had not landed well.
You were defending the position rather than addressing the room.
Exactly. And the room was not asking me to defend the position. The room was telling me that something about how I had framed my own role in this project had overstepped. I had moved from serving their vision to substituting my judgment for theirs, even if my judgment happened to be better. That is not the service they had hired.
How did the call end?
Professionally, but coldly. They said they would take some time to look at what I had presented and come back to me, which I knew immediately was not a good sign. When a client needs time to think about work they love, they usually say they love it first and then mention they want to review the details.
What did you do after the call?
I sat with it for about 2 hours, not productively, just going over what I had said and how it had landed and what I should have said instead, and then I wrote an email. I want to read you a version of what I wrote because I think the language of it matters.
Please.
I said something like, "I wanted to follow up on our call today. I have been reflecting on something I said, and I do not think it came across the way I intended. When I explained my decision to move away from the original color reference, I framed it in a way that may have suggested I thought I understood your firm better than you do."
What happened?
They agreed to a call the following morning, and that call was one of the hardest professional conversations I have had. Not because they were unkind, they were not unkind, but because I had to hold 2 things at the same time. I had to genuinely acknowledge what I had done wrong and how I had framed my role.
Those 2 things can pull against each other.
They can, because if you acknowledge too completely, you seem to be saying the work was wrong. And if you hold too firmly to the work, you seem to be saying you are not taking the feedback seriously. The path between them is narrow.
How did you walk it?
I separated the 2 things explicitly. I said, I want to talk about 2 things that are related but different. The first is how I spoke about my role in this project, and I think I got that wrong. The second is the creative direction itself, which I still believe in and would like the chance to explain more clearly than I did yesterday. Can we take them one at a time?
That structure is very deliberate.
I learned it from a difficult experience. When you have done something that has a professional dimension and a relational dimension, conflating them makes both harder to address the relational thing. How I position myself.
What did they say when you separated it that way?
One of them said, "Yes, that is actually helpful," and something eased in the call. Not everything, but something.
What did you say about the first thing, the role question?
I said, "I think I implied that I had better insight into your firm's identity than you did. I did not mean that. What I meant was that I had found a visual language that I thought expressed something true about your work that the original color reference might not have captured. That is a different thing from saying, I know your firm better than you do, you know your firm."
And they received that?
They received it, not immediately and not completely, but enough to continue. We spent another 40 minutes on the work itself. I represented the direction with that framing, that I was translating what they knew into visual form rather than substituting my vision for theirs, my workable. We had found something not quite where we started, but somewhere workable.
Did they stay as a client?
They did. The project finished about 6 weeks later. It was harder from that point than it had been before the call. There was a carefulness between us that had not been there before, a checking, but the work was good. They used it. And about a year later, one of the founders recommended me to another firm, which told me something had been repaired even if it had not been forgotten.
I had something similar happen with a student, not quite the same context, but the same structure of the mistake.
What happened?
This was maybe 3 years ago. A student in an advanced writing class, very capable, very motivated. She had turned in an essay on a personal topic, something about her relationship with her parents and the pressure she felt around her academic path. The writing was technically strong, but I left a comment in the margin that said something like, "The argument here reads more like compliance than genuine belief."
That is a difficult thing to read about something personal.
She did not come to office hours that week or the next. When she did come back, it was very formal, very distant. I had moved from teacher to critic of her inner life. That is not a position I'd been invited into. I had read the essay as a writing exercise and missed that she had taken a risk to write it at all.
You crossed from assessing the work to assessing the person.
Without realizing that is what I was doing. And the comment was not wrong exactly. There was something more honest she could have written, but the way I said it made her feel seen in a way she had not asked to be seen. That is a different thing from being helped.
What did you do?
I sent her a message through the class platform. Very short, I said. I wanted to check in about the comment I left on your essay. I think I may have overstepped in a way that was not helpful. Can we talk? She replied the same day, and when we met, I did something similar to what you described.
Did she continue in the class?
She did, and the essays she wrote after that were more open than the ones before. I do not know if that was because of the conversation or despite it or unrelated to it. But the formality between us broke after that meeting. She would stop by sometimes just to talk about what she was working on. Not for feedback, just to think out loud.
The acknowledgement made room for something.
I think it did. And what I learned is close to what you learned. But from the teaching side, when you are in a role of evaluating someone else's work, there is always a risk of the evaluation becoming a verdict about the person rather than an observation about the work. The moment it becomes a verdict, the person stops being able to hear you. They are managing the verdict.
Observation versus verdict. That distinction keeps coming up in different forms.
It does, and I think the language of it is important. Saying this reads more like compliance than belief is a verdict. Saying I find myself wondering if there's another angle you have not quite reached yet. Would you be open to exploring? It is an invitation. The content is similar. The relationship it creates is completely different. What did you learn from it?
Several things. The most practical one is this. When you are presenting creative work, the framing of your role in making the decisions matters as much as the decisions themselves. Saying, I moved away from X because I felt it would serve you better, is completely different from saying I moved away from X because I felt it was not capturing what your firm actually is. The first positions you as serve.
The language constructs the relationship as much as the action does.
Yes, and in a professional creative context, the client needs to feel that their knowledge of their own identity is the authority. Your creative judgment is in service of that authority the moment you imply the reverse, even accidentally. Even if your judgment is better, you have taken something from them that they will not easily give back.
What about the email you wrote that evening? Because I think the speed of that matters.
It mattered enormously. I have thought about this. If I had waited until the next day to reach out, the overnight silence would have been the communication. They would have spent the evening with an unaddressed discomfort and no signal from me that I had understood. What had happened? It seriously. I'm not waiting to see if this goes away.
The quick acknowledgement as its own message.
In professional relationships especially, when something goes wrong, the speed of your response signals how seriously you take it. A slow response suggests you are hoping it will resolve itself, or that you are managing your reaction rather than engaging with theirs. A quick, honest acknowledgement says, I am present with this. I am not running from it.
What would you have done differently, knowing everything you know now?
I would have framed the color decision differently in the original presentation, instead of explaining that I had moved away from what they described because I felt it was not capturing their firm. I would have said, the brief gave me a starting point, and as I worked, I found a direction that I think speaks more directly to the strength of what you do.
And if they had pushed back even then
I would have listened first before explaining further. The instinct to explain more when someone pushes back is almost always wrong in a creative context, because more explanation reads as more defensiveness. What they need to feel is heard before they can hear you.
Let me give listeners some language they can actually use, because I think a lot of people have been in the situation Amyy described, where something lands wrong in a professional meeting and they do not know what to reach for in the moment.
The hardest part is that the moment it lands wrong, you feel it, but you often do not know what to say right then. You are still processing what happened while also being expected to continue the conversation.
So what do you reach for in the moment?
The simplest version is, I want to say that differently. You say it, pause, and reframe it. Signals that you caught something without making a large announcement of the mistake. Most people will let you continue.
And if the moment has already passed, if you are already 2 minutes past it,
then you step back explicitly. You say, before we go further, I want to revisit something I said a moment ago. I do not think I framed it well, and you restate it. The stepping back signals accountability.
What about in the follow-up, the email or message after?
Keep it short and specific. Long follow-up messages read as managing your own anxiety, not addressing theirs. You name what happened, you say what you meant to say. You make a small ask, can we talk before you decide? Can we find 15 minutes, something that keeps the door open without demanding a response?
And what do you avoid?
The over-explanation, the long justification of why you said what you said, the listing of everything that led up to the moment. None of that is what the other person needs. What they need is a signal that you understood how it landed and that you are taking it seriously. Everything beyond that is for you, not for them.
Think of a professional conversation where something turned in a direction you did not intend, where something you said landed differently from how you meant it. Did you notice the moment it happened, and did you address it or hope it would pass?
The hoping it will pass is almost always more expensive than the addressing it in the moment.
Almost always more expensive, and often the thing you were afraid of in the addressing is smaller than the thing that accumulates in the hoping.
That is the lesson I keep learning, in different rooms, in different forms, but the same lesson.